My name is Lena Caldwell. And 3 weeks ago, I was just a temporary archivist hired to catalog a dying man's estate. The pay wasn't great, but it covered my rent and kept the lights on. I wasn't family. I wasn't even supposed to be in the room this morning. But when Cole Whitaker, the attorney handling Graham Ellington's will, cleared his throat, the air in that oak-paneled study turned heavy. He didn't start with the usual condolences. He looked straight at me and said, "Before we proceed, Ms. Caldwell, I need your full legal name for the record." Every head turned. Avery Ellington Rhodes, Graham's elegant niece, frowned like she was smelling something sour. Cole continued calmly. "Mr. Ellington's will names a single heir, his biological daughter. The child he was forced to give up for adoption in 1963. Then he paused. DNA confirmation included. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. I felt every eye on me. The outsider, with a clipboard and a borrowed suit. I hadn't come here looking for family or for fortune, but at that moment, it felt like both had just found me. If you were me, would you claim a family that once erased you? Avery Ellington Rhodes was the first to recover from the shock. Her voice sliced through the silence like a polished blade. She said it was absurd. That Graham Ellington would never leave his estate to a stranger who had simply alphabetized his archives. Her tone was calm, but her hands betrayed her tight on the armrest, nails digging into the leather. Cole Whitaker, steady as ever, reminded her that the will was signed, notarized, and sealed 3 months before Graham's passing. He added that independent investigators had verified every document, including the DNA report. Avery laughed. Too sharp and too fast. The kind of laugh that fills a room with something colder than disbelief. I stayed still, letting their outrage burn itself out. I'd spent too many years being the invisible one in other people's rooms to flinch now. Avery turned her attention to me, studying my face as if she could erase my existence by memorizing it. Then she muttered something under her breath. Something about cleaning up the mess. Before pulling out her phone, I caught just enough one name, one word. Colin. Cole continued reading, unfazed. But I noticed Avery stepping away, whispering into her phone with the urgency of someone putting out a fire. My instincts sharpened. The air in that room felt suddenly divided. Cole was focused on the law, Avery on damage control, and me, somewhere in between, trying to understand why that name, Colin, sounded less like family and more like a secret. I didn't know it yet. But that single overheard word would unravel everything she'd tried to hide. Cole Whitaker reached for a sealed envelope marked in Graham Ellington's familiar handwriting. He placed it in front of me, as if it were something fragile, something alive. The room quieted. Even Avery's restless pacing stopped. Inside was a letter, written in black ink that had bled slightly along the edges of the paper. Graham's words were deliberate, steady, the script of a man who knew his time was running out. He wrote that he had searched for me for decades, that my birth mother, Jennifer Ward, had died trying to reach him. He admitted he'd been too much of a coward to tell me the truth while he was alive. Then came a line that caught in my throat. I needed you to know who you are, and I needed you to know me before the inheritance poisoned everything. Folded inside the same envelope was a small velvet box. I opened it, expecting jewelry. What I found instead was a gold locket, the kind from another century. The initials G, E, and J, W were engraved on the front. Inside, one photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and fear in her smile. The other, a newborn wrapped in hospital blankets, My birth date was written faintly on the back. Avery scoffed that sentiment wasn't evidence. But Cole disagreed. He called it corroboration matching dates, handwriting, and photographs documented in the estate's archive. I closed the locket carefully, its hinge soft from years of use. The proof was no longer emotional, it was official, and that made it dangerous. That evening, long after the lawyers had left, I stood alone in Graham Ellington's study. The letter had mentioned a locked drawer on the right side of his desk. I found the small brass key taped underneath the drawer's edge, exactly where he said it would be. The lock gave a tired click, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. Old ledgers, typed medical reports, and envelopes labeled in Graham's handwriting. The first file was a medication log from his oncologist, Dr. Colin Mercer. Each entry listed dosage reductions that made no medical sense. Morphine, once administered daily, had been halved without any recorded reason. On the same dates, there were notarized documents updates to his limited power of attorney, all bearing Avery Ellington Rhodes's signature. I flipped through another stack bank statements showing transfers from Graham's personal accounts to a holding company managed by Avery. Each transaction matched the days his pain medication was reduced. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. At the bottom lay a yellow legal pad filled with Graham's notes, written in an unsteady hand. Avery and Colin. One page read, "I say it's for my own good. I think it's for theirs." He had drawn arrows connecting medical charts to wire transfers, then underlined a single phrase, "She's controlling the morphine and the money." I sat there for a long time, surrounded by proof that turned every kind word Avery had spoken into strategy. Graham hadn't just left behind evidence, he had built a map. I began cataloging everything: dates, signatures, dosages, transfers, each detail another step toward a truth that could no longer be buried. And for the first time, I stopped feeling like the outsider. I was the witness he'd chosen. The next morning, I began verifying what Graham's notes had already hinted at. As part of my job, I still had access to the estate's archival server, where every delivery receipt and visitor log was stored. I cross-checked the timestamps from Dr. Colin Mercer's medical visits against Avery Ellington Rhodes's digital calendar. The overlaps were precise late-night visits marked as private consultations. Hours after regular medical staff had gone home, I requested copies of the security gate records. Each time Colin's car entered the property, Avery's vehicle was already parked there, often for hours before he arrived. The visits coincided with the same dates. Graham's medication had been altered, and his signature had appeared on new authorizations. That pattern wasn't just convenient, it was coordinated. Later that afternoon, I found Iris Doyle, the housekeeper, sorting linens in the laundry room. She looked exhausted, older than the week before. When I mentioned Colin's name, her face changed. She confessed she had once seen Avery and the doctor together, kissing in the garage the night Graham's morphine had been withheld. Avery had paid her to stay silent. Money Iris had used for her grandson's surgery. The shame in her voice told me everything I needed to know. With her permission, I recorded her statement and had her sign it. The fear in her eyes was replaced by something steadier: resolve. By evening, I had enough evidence to expose Avery's manipulation and the affair that fueled it. Graham had left me the truth. My job now was to make sure it reached daylight. The house had always felt heavy with secrets. But that night, I could almost hear the walls start to loosen their grip. When the lawyers reconvened the next morning, the atmosphere inside Graham Ellington's study was brittle. Avery Ellington Rhodes sat across from me, perfectly composed, her pearl earrings catching the weak winter light. Cole Whitaker opened a second envelope sealed in red wax. Graham's instructions were clear. This letter was to be read only in the event of a dispute. Cole's voice was steady as he read aloud. Graham had written that any person proven to have interfered with his medical care or used coercion for financial gain would forfeit all rights to his estate and face legal review. The silence afterward was deafening. Avery smirked and called it manipulation, insisting I had preyed on a dying man. I didn't argue. I simply slid a folder across the table. Inside was the documentation security logs, payment transfers, medical dosage charts, and Iris Doyle's signed testimony. Each page matched a date, a dose, a transaction. Cole examined the material, his jaw tightening. He turned to Avery and asked if she wanted to respond. She didn't. Her confidence began to crack, her voice faltering as she claimed misunderstanding. But the evidence spoke louder than either of us. When Cole finally looked up, his tone was formal. He declared that, per the late Graham Ellington's request, these findings would be submitted directly to the probate court and the district attorney's office for review. For the first time, Avery's eyes dropped to the floor. I had no need to raise my voice. The documents spoke for me, and the truth had finally found its seat at the table. By the time the pre-trial hearing arrived, the story had already leaked. Headlines called me the archivist who seduced a fortune. Reporters waited outside the courthouse, cameras flashing as if the truth were a performance. Avery Ellington Rhodes walked in beside her legal team, perfectly styled and radiating confidence, playing her role as the wronged heiress. Inside, Cole Whitaker remained composed. He opened with precision. Submitting the evidence packet, we'd assembled financial transfers, dosage charts, visitor logs, and Iris Doyle's sworn affidavit. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The documents did the talking. Avery's attorney countered with claims of forgery and manipulation, suggesting I'd fabricated the records after Graham's death. The argument was rehearsed, polished, but hollow. Cole stepped forward again, producing the official timestamps and notarized seals from the estate's internal system records that couldn't be altered without federal authorization. The judge reviewed the files silently for several minutes before speaking. Her words were deliberate. The court finds sufficient evidence to proceed. Ms. Rhodes, your counsel will have 48 hours to provide the full original documentation of the power of attorney transfers and all medical authorizations. Avery's poise cracked for the briefest moment, her fingers tightening around her pen. Outside the courtroom, microphones crowded my face. I said nothing more than, "The truth always leaves a paper trail." Cole smiled faintly beside me. He knew what I did. Avery's team couldn't produce the originals. She had deleted them. But what she didn't know was that I'd already printed every copy 2 days earlier. That night, after the courthouse emptied and the reporters had disappeared, I sat alone in the apartment I still rented on the edge of town. The documents proving I was Graham Ellington's daughter were stacked neatly on the table beside a mug of untouched coffee. For the first time since his death, the noise had faded, and what remained was a question I couldn't escape. Did I want any of it? The estate? The money? And the title? All of it had been built inside a family that had spent years feeding on control and silence. Accepting it meant becoming part of the same lineage that had kept me hidden. Refusing it meant walking away from the truth my father had fought to uncover. I kept hearing Graham's voice in that letter. He'd written that he didn't want to buy my forgiveness, only to give me what was already mine. He'd chosen me not for my bloodline, but for how I'd lived with quiet integrity when no one was watching. Still, Part of me wondered if taking the inheritance would make me exactly what Avery accused me of being, a woman chasing wealth she didn't earn. Another part of me knew it wasn't about money anymore. It was about reclaiming a name that had been taken from me before I could even speak it. If you were me, would you take it to honor him or to prove them wrong? 2 days before the final hearing, I returned to Ellington House to gather the last of Graham's records. The study felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the truth had already started to clear the air. While sorting through the lower shelves, Iris Doyle approached quietly, holding a small cassette tape in her trembling hand. She said she'd found it inside the back panel of Graham's answering machine, the one Avery had ordered, replaced right after his death. The tape was old, its label almost rubbed off. I pressed play. First came static, then voices. Avery's, sharp and impatient. Keep the dosage low tonight. Colin, you know what I need him to sign. Then a man's low response. Unmistakably, Doctor. Colin Mercer. Consider it done. For us? The sound of a kiss ended the recording. Iris stood frozen. Her eyes filled with guilt but also relief. She whispered that she'd kept silent long enough. I placed the cassette gently into an evidence sleeve. One more truth had just surfaced. As I rechecked the bookshelves, a draft brushed my arm. Behind Graham's portrait of his publishing house, I found an envelope taped to the frame. Inside was another handwritten note, dated a week before his death. It read, "If you're reading this, Lena, they will say I was confused. Don't let them. I've seen what Avery and Colin have done. Let the law finish what I couldn't." It wasn't just evidence now. It was a confession and a final request. The next morning, Cole and I filed both items into the court record. This time, we weren't just defending a will, we were indicting a legacy. The courtroom was full that morning, heavy with the kind of silence that waits for a fall. Avery Ellington Rhodes sat beside her defense team, her expression carefully neutral. Cole Whitaker stood at the plaintiff's table with the precision of a man who had memorized every line of evidence. I took my seat behind him, the locket in my hand, feeling Graham Ellington's presence in every breath of that room. Cole began by presenting the chain of evidence, the dosage charts, the bank transfers, the visitor logs, the recorded tape, and Graham's final letter. His argument was simple. Each piece existed independently. Yet together, they told one story. The reduction of medication coincided with the signing of financial authorizations. Each authorization funneled money into accounts controlled by Avery. And every visit from Dr. Colin Mercer lined up perfectly with those dates. Avery's attorney tried to deflect, claiming the tape was doctored and that Graham had been mentally unstable near the end. But Cole countered with hospital assessments showing full cognitive capacity until his final week. Then he played the tape. Avery's voice filled the courtroom, followed by the sound of that faint unmistakable kiss. The judge leaned forward, her expression cold. When she spoke, her tone left no space for doubt. The court validated Graham Ellington's will in its entirety, confirmed the authenticity of all submitted evidence, and ordered a criminal investigation into Avery Ellington Rhodes and Dr. Colin Mercer for abuse, financial fraud, and obstruction. Avery didn't move. Her face went pale, her composure stripped away. Cole exhaled quietly beside me. The smallest sign of relief? It was over, not the pain, not the loss, but the silence that had protected them. That part ended here. In the weeks after the verdict, the Ellington estate felt less like a house and more like a threshold. The wealth Graham Ellington had built, the land, the art, the publishing empire, no longer felt like privilege. It felt like responsibility I knew what Avery Ellington Rhodes had done with power. I also knew what my father had hoped it could become in the right hands. So I met with Cole Whitaker and drafted the foundation papers myself. The first endowment came directly from the estate's dividends and was named the Jennifer Ward Trust, after the mother who never had the chance to raise me. Its mission was simple but sharp: to fund legal aid for victims of elder abuse and reunite adopted families separated by secrecy and law. The Ellington House, once closed behind stone gates, reopened twice a month as a resource center. In Graham's study, the same room where the will had been read, volunteers now sorted case files and correspondence for people trying to find lost relatives or seek justice for those forgotten. When the press called it poetic, I disagreed. It wasn't poetry. It was restitution. Avery and Dr. Colin Mercer were facing trial, stripped of the very influence they had weaponized. My revenge didn't require humiliation or spectacle. It lived in the quiet power of reparation, turning what they used for control into something that set others free. When the final rulings came, there were no winners, only truth. Avery Ellington Rhodes was convicted of financial fraud and elder abuse. The court seized her personal holdings and barred her from serving on any corporate board. Her name, once synonymous with influence, now appeared in legal digests as a cautionary footnote. Dr. Colin Mercer lost his medical license pending criminal sentencing. His clinic shuttered within a month, and the patients he had once manipulated for profit found new care under state supervision. He stopped answering reporters' questions after the first week. But the silence was its own admission. Iris Doyle, the housekeeper who had lived under both guilt and fear, received partial immunity for testifying. She now works part-time at the Jennifer Ward Trust, organizing archives for families still searching for their own missing histories. Her steadiness reminds me of how courage often comes after confession. Cole Whitaker declined public recognition. Though he remains on the Foundation's ethics board, he said Graham Ellington's real estate was no longer a monument to wealth but to correction. As for me, I never moved into the main house. I still rent the same apartment, still take the bus sometimes, and every evening, I walk through the study that once belonged to Graham. It no longer feels haunted. The ghosts finally have names, and their stories have been filed where they belong, in the open, where no one can bury them again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.